Justin Baker, hope you're not superstitious. This is episode number 13 of the Path to Follow podcast.
I'm not superstitious.
Welcome.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
How you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Doing all right?
Yeah, I've been binging on Path to Follow podcast
Have
recently.
you?
So, oh, yeah.
Okay.
They're fantastic.
You liking them? Good.
Oh, I mean, I'm getting to learn things about my colleagues that I didn't quite know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Especially I'm trying to get some of the newer faculty on here too, because we haven't really gotten a chance to even have lunch together.
Right.
You know. So I'm glad you're enjoying them. It's been fun.
Yeah.
It's a fun little side project.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Thanks for doing it.
Yeah, for sure. So Justin, I want to talk a little bit about how you, in our first form meeting, I'm in your junior form, and you were talking about how over the summer, during the COVID, time to yourself, time to get into some different, areas of interest you've been meaning to get into, and maybe you hadn't had a chance to. You found some different things that you like to do, and I'm interested in talking about what those are.
Right, man, you're going right to it. I see.
Yeah.
Right
You're talking about
music stuff.
No, some of the Eastern philosophy. You were saying.
Eastern philosophy. Yeah, so I am fascinated and have been for a long time, particularly after I took a class in graduate school on Eastern religion and philosophy. I finally picked up and read Siddhartha, which was interesting. I've been trying. I always say that I'm a failed Buddhist, right? Which I think actually makes me a pretty good Buddhist. I'm trying my best to particularly during these times, right? Be here in the moment, and let certain things go.
So we talked to Rob Hubeck yesterday about meditation, and that's not his thing that he turns to relieve some stress, but maybe it's something that you do. I've gotten into it a little bit over the summer. And
have you?
Now it's an obsession. Now it's almost like coffee. It's like I need it.
Are you doing like guided meditation? Like how are you engaging in meditation?
I do both. I do, some on my own where I'm just sitting, no noises. Sometimes the guided, it's just, I don't really want someone talking to me. I just want to sit there. Sometimes I do Sam Harris, and I like his Waking Up app.
Right.
He's just got a calming voice, and he really got me into it because I read his book Waking Up over the summer, and I learned a little bit about the Eastern philosophy and kind of the background to all of this, all of these methods. And Sam Harris is going on retreats, and he's done the whole thing, so he really understands it at a deep level. But I just like the way about him. I think
he is a fascinating and complicated thinker. Totally. So I remember first getting into him. I can't even remember the name of the book, but I read it in college, kind of about his thoughts on Islam and religion. He's an atheist, right? Yep. Infamously an atheist. And I think at that time I could proudly say I was an atheist, and then I've kind of walked back from that and become a little bit more humbled and say I'm more of an agnostic. But, oh gosh, guys like him and Richard Dawkins, Bill Maher to some extent are kind of inspirational in terms of their proud atheism. But in terms of meditation, I'm not very good at meditating.
Okay.
But I've found alternate ways, I think, to kind of connect with a sense of center, or to kind of lose the ego. And for me, it's music. So I can spend many, 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 many hours kind of just playing the guitar, and you feel a kind of withering away of the self. It's really wonderful.
Awesome. I never got into playing an instrument. That's something that I want to do. But yeah. When did you start playing guitar?
I started playing guitar at 16. But I've always played musical instruments. So at my public school, you could start playing a musical instrument in 3rd grade, but you had to start with the violin, which was, I don't understand I'm sure there was some reasoning behind that.
Ours was the recorder. We had to play
right. Or the bells, right? Yeah, you can play the bells. So I started off with violin, and then moved to trumpet, and then started playing guitar at 16.
So you play the guitar. You're also just a music lover.
Oh my God.
You love all sorts of music.
Mhm.
What are your go-to artists?
Well, you've kind of got the cornerstone artists that you constantly come back to,
Hmm.
right? Kind of the lodestones of your musical library. So for me, it's Bob Dylan for sure, and then also some great blues artists like John Lee Hooker or Lightning Hopkins.
My dad's a big John Lee Hooker
Oh my
fan.
gosh, there's something about the blues. It's almost impossible to articulate, right? Because it's musically, it's a very straightforward structure, right? It's three chords most of the time, and then the pentatonic scale. But within that really simple, it's like poetically it would be like a haiku, right? Like you've got whatever 353, I think, right? With haikus, it's the same musical simplicity, but the way that you can fill in those spaces, either lyrically or sonically or tonally, is just, it seems infinite, or certainly immense to me.
Because of the spontaneity of what you can do in between.
The spontaneity, the space that the chord progression gives you to kind of explore, which to me is the opposite of jazz. Right? I've tried really hard to. I respect jazz musicians in a way that it would be hard to explain, but to me, there's so much going on there. There's not enough space to
Create.
yeah, create, explore, emote. Yeah. So yeah, the blues, and then of course from the blues you get into all these kind of popular reinterpretations of the blues, like the Rolling Stones, and so they're another kind of North Star musically. And anybody who's trying to push push the genre forward a little bit and take a lot of weird risks, like Tom Waits. And I know, Mr. Hubeck and I could have a debate about Tom Waits. He does not like Tom Waits, and I think he's one of the most important musicians of the last 50 or 60 years. So yeah, I guess those are just some of and then vocally it would be people like if I could sing like anybody, I want to sing like Sam Cooke, right? So yeah, I find inspiration in different musicians.
Interesting.
In different styles and genres.
I think what I am missing most right now during COVID, and I think probably everyone, is live music, concerts. But I agree. I find a lot of relaxation and freedom just listening to the music I like. And
yeah. Can I ask you a question about your relationship with music?
Yeah.
So when you're listening to music, what's your motive? So I ask students all the time because they have earbuds in all the time, and they'll say, "Can I write this essay and listen to music at the same time?" And I'm like, "Well, you can only be doing one of those things well at a time."
Yeah.
So if you care about the music, you wouldn't want to do that and something else at the same time.
Totally.
Like, how are you? What's your listening style?
I've thought a lot about that because I agree. Most of the time that people listen to music, they're doing something else. They're multitasking.
Right.
But at that point, you're not appreciating the full, scope of what you're listening to. And I've tried to just listen to the music and just take a break from whatever it is that I'm doing. And maybe that's a product of some of the meditation I've been doing and just single-minded focus.
Right.
Thinking about one thing. And I think if you're trying to do too many things at once, you're not actually listening to music. It's just kind of the soundtrack to your life a little bit.
That's a great phrase. And I use that all the time. It's like, I don't need a soundtrack to my life.
Yeah, I want to appreciate,
Yeah.
But to be honest, I'm not a musician. I don't know any of the ins and outs.
Right.
I'm following along with what you're saying about blues and jazz, and that makes sense to me, but I never played an instrument. I don't know about chords. I don't know about, all of the art that goes into that. So I wish I did. That's a goal of mine, is to pick up an instrument. I tried to play piano a little bit, but it takes such a commitment.
You just have to be willing to be bad for a very long time.
Yeah.
And when you're 16, you're just, what are you doing, right? You're spending a lot of time in your room trying to get away from your siblings or parents, and it becomes a really constructive way to spend that free time, right? And thank the Lord I didn't have Instagram or Facebook to pine about what I was like missing out on or something. But yeah, and I was awful for a very long time.
Mm-hmm. Well, we talked about that yesterday with Rob Hubeck on
really?
here about the importance of failing and falling forward and learning from your failures. And that's, I mean, if you play an instrument or play sports or do anything, like going back and reflecting on what you did wrong or what you messed up and then doing it again, that's like that's the whole point of learning. And playing an instrument is a great way to learn that skill or that idea of what it takes to learn.
Yeah, and it's a series of setting goals that aren't an abstraction, right? Like I want to sound like Stevie Ray Vaughan, right? Or like I want to get that lick right.
Mm-hmm.
So you have kind of really almost like role models, right? That you're trying to model your playing after. So yeah, you're failing all the time, but you have this like platonic ideal that you're kind of working toward all the time. And then somewhere in between there, you actually find what you sound like, which is awesome.
Right.
You stop trying to sound like other people and you embrace kind of how you play or what you sound like. It's really cool.
Yeah. And I always relate things to sports, and that's the way that I really learned to play lacrosse and to develop as a lacrosse player. Is I always tell younger kids, find one player that you like and you like watching and just try to mimic them and try to do what they're doing. Right. And then once you get pretty good, then you can start to do your own thing and you can throw your own twist in there, your own creativity. But it takes that ideal to start that path that you're going down.
Totally. And that should be applied to all endeavors, right? Writing. Start by trying to write like somebody where you like how they write.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Yes, that's a wonderful, I think, way to think about growth.
Yeah, it's that inspiration that kicks you off. And I have a few friends that, like one of my really good friends that I want to get on the podcast is, we both talk about the importance of persistence because we describe ourselves as persistent people. And he is one of the most persistent guys I know, Tim Edmonds. And he picked up the guitar in, I think, his senior year or junior year of college. And the guy plays every day. Like he doesn't take a break. And now, at first he was okay. We watched him get a little bit better.
Played that Oasis song over and over again.
Exactly. Yeah. But now he's posting.
Smoke on the water.
Now he's posting great stuff onto SoundCloud, and he's doing really well, and he's picking up other instruments now, and he's singing a little bit. So it's just cool to see that development. And if you fail and you quit, that's one thing. But if you keep coming back and you have that persistence, it's all about.
It's got to matter to you, right? Like it mattered to me that I could express myself creatively through this instrument. And so I think that's the motivating goal, is it mattered to me. It wasn't just something I was trying out, right? It was going to become a part of who I was. And what's that, the Malcolm Gladwell thing, right? 10,000 hours or something, right? Like it's probably more than that. But it's, and this notion, what I also love too about music is that you never feel like you're there, right? There's never going to be a moment in my life where I'm like, yep, got that, figured that out.
I feel that way about teaching too. And that's like, I've only been doing it for 3 years, but still every time you look back, I'm sure, every year goes by or every class goes by, you look back and you reflect and you're like, I could have done that better.
Oh, yeah.
It keeps you going forward though, which is, I think, a positive quality about it.
I a couple of years ago, I set a goal for myself to design a lesson that would fail, but that was like crazy ambitious, and to try to do that once a semester, like try something really wild that had an 80% chance of failing. But what I found is that, I was actually succeeding in it a little bit more often than I thought. But, it kind of broke the routine a little bit. It got me to think a little bit differently about how to kind of help students understand content material. And
How radical are we talking here in terms of lesson plan?
Not that crazy. I mean, for me, sometimes it could be like utilizing a new piece of technology, it's not like totally out there.
I have not touched the owl yet. I'm kind of in this like half Zoom, half in person routine, and the owl's sitting there, and I want to use it, but I just haven't had the really chance or need to plug it in yet. Have you worked with that at all?
So you and I, it sounds like we're doing the same thing. I'm doing, 35 minutes with the kids in the room, 35 minutes. No.
So I have the kids at home on my laptop right here, and then I have the kids in class who are on their computers too.
Oh, okay.
And we just have our conversation about the reading from the previous night. But the kids in the class, when they want to speak out, they have to turn off their mute. And then I just tell them, pretend like we're in a regular class. So you're not totally dialed in on your computer the whole time. You're actually speaking with the people in the class, but the people from home can still hear you.
I like that way better. I tried the owl one time, and I couldn't focus on the human beings in front of me and the digitized version of human beings on the screen at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a challenge with my setup too, but it's not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
But I do think, I don't know. I haven't really gotten out of this groove of what I've been doing, and I think it's been working. So there's no real need to change it.
It's by definition a hybrid model, right? So you feel like you're occupying two different educational spaces at the same time, and it can be a challenge, particularly for people who are used to, a more singular version of delivering lessons. Yeah,
but I do find, I think we're doing the best we can with it. It's challenging, but I think the kids that are in the classroom are glad to be there, and we can always end a little bit early and have a more normal class, off the screen. But
you know what I've been surprised by? So I'm doing this where they have an asynchronous assignment every week that's related to whatever it is that we're reading. So for example, when we were doing in my 60s class, a civil rights unit, I had them listen to the 1619 podcast on the birth of American music, which is by Wesley Moore, which is phenomenal. And then kind of respond to how he was kind of narrating the evolution of American music and kind of the significant and necessary importance of Black music in that. My students are doing so well with the asynchronous work.
So am mine.
Right?
And now that we're going a little bit, backwards into that fully digital learning space from the hybrid, I've just given them, now I know them, and I can know what to expect from them, and they know me. I can hop on the Zoom in the morning and just give them their assignment, tell them what's due at the end of class, and then just go do it.
Isn't that, to me, I've been so, it feels really rewarding to know that you as a teacher are just setting up this infrastructure, and it takes a lot of work behind the scenes to get those asynchronous assignments together. But to see how meaningfully they'll engage with them, it's been wonderful. And it kind of reaffirms the fact that good teaching is when you are not the center of attention. My former colleague, Mr. Dan Christian, liked to remind me that this is not about me. And I think these asynchronous assignments have continued. Yeah, of course I'm, laying the groundwork for the lesson, but the learning that they're doing or engaged in is not about me. It's about how they're engaging with the.
Yeah, and that's how it should be in school in the first place. You want them to be curious, or you want them to go home and look up whatever it is you're learning and dive deeper into it. So I think this has actually helped. There are some good things about all of this.
That's right. Yeah, I'm trying not to be totally pessimistic about every day of work. Yeah.
But I had a really good idea from Beth Knapp when we did the podcast, and we were talking about how she sends her seniors off onto their own Zooms, record it, send your conversation back to me. And I tried that out, and it was awesome, and the kids all loved it. So, that kind of thing. And then I did a more creative assignment this week on I Sit and Look Out by Walt Whitman.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of just sitting and like looking at the world and the different aspects of humanity. And I had all the students write their own version of that. And I think more trying to take my curriculum, make it a little bit more creative.
Yeah.
They're looking for an outlet for some creativity. Yeah.
How did the kids engage with Whitman? I think he's like just rebellious and iconoclastic and like one of the heroes of, like he's the first punk rock poet.
Absolutely. And we're kind of in the middle of him right now. So we've only read 2 poems from him. Yeah. But we read it together over Zoom, and then I kind of sent them on their own to do this creative work.
Yeah.
But they received it well. They received Whitman well. And I think maybe some of his harder poems, more difficult poems, Song of Myself maybe would be a stretch for right now. But the shorter, more manageable ones, they're doing well with.
Do they get the sense that, like when they're reading him, because he's such a hallmark of American poetry, that he wasn't that for most of his life, that he was just failing constantly as a poet, and now after the fact it's like, oh, wasn't Leaves of Grass brilliant?
Right. Yeah, it's so interesting how a lot of artists I've been looking at lately during their lives, they were
ahead of their time.
Yeah. And I read the bell jar Sylvia Plath that I wanted to talk to you about today. Sure. She wasn't, the bell jar wasn't big when that came out either, or her poetry wasn't even very widely known or celebrated when she was living. Granted, she had a very short life, but a lot of these amazing artists, and she's she's an unbelievable poet and just wordsmith, and people didn't appreciate that when she was.
Well, do you write creatively? Do you do do you have a creative outlet?
Absolutely. Yeah. I do political cartoons. Right. I do a lot of drawing.
Yeah.
I journal. I've been journaling a lot. I do want to write more creatively, and I've been saying that. And I do a little bit, but then I put it down, and I'll go a week and work on some things, and then forget about it. But that's kind of my reading style too. It's like I'll pick up a book, be so into it,
yeah.
like the bell jar. I'm halfway through the bell jar right now, and I'll put it down and I'll forget about it.
I have 2 follow-up questions. So have you ever had a political cartoon or a cartoon that you've done and you've shared it with someone and they don't get it?
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So imagine this is I'm bringing this back to Plath, but so as an artist or a creative spirit, right? You are constantly endeavoring to define yourself through whatever medium you choose, right? Like it's the most pure version of self-expression. It's always going to be imperfect, right? Because you're not quite ever getting it right, which is why artists are always revising. And then you share that with somebody and they're like, "Meh." So when that happens, this is why artists are so scared or afraid to share their stuff, because when that happens, it's not like your work is being rejected, it's you're being rejected. And so imagine this unbelievably talented person, phenomenally smart, right? Is writing this, again, really important poetry. And the response is like, yeah. Mm-hmm. She internalizes that.
Yeah.
And she just can't. Yeah. She publishes the bell jar, under a pseudonym because she's afraid that her mother will be and her mother was just embarrassed.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, her story is a sad one, but it's not hard to, understand.
Did her mental conditions of depression, I think bipolar, did that set in kind of after she was already writing, or was that?
You might know more about that. I don't know if she was ever diagnosed as a living person with bipolar disorder. Perhaps someone has kind of posthumously diagnosed her as that.
Maybe, yeah.
But she was certainly institutionalized and went through the shock treatments that are detailed in the book. And right. Mm-hmm.
So how does the bell jar go in what class do you teach that?
60s
in the 60s lit class. How does that go over with your students?
It goes over really well.
Yeah.
I think it's, remember they're seniors, right? So they're reading a book about identity and feeling as if what you're being told you're supposed to be isn't fulfilling. And this is hitting seniors at a time where they're on the precipice of achieving the thing they've been working for their whole life, right? They're going to get into the college that they'll, put on every sweatshirt and t-shirt that they wear for the next 4 years. And it becomes kind of their main identity. And so I think this book comes at a pretty good time, right? Because I think whether they are doing it consciously or not, are already starting to question whether this thing that they've been working so long for is actually going to be the fulfilling threshold experience that they've been told it's going to be.
As a college counselor and someone who teaches a book like this, do you think the pressure surrounding college, how unhealthy do you think that is in the world today? And we're talking with Rob about that too a little bit, because everyone feels that pressure to go to the best college they can, and to some degree that's a great thing, but to some degree it's unhealthy and maybe steering them down a path that maybe isn't right for them, for students.
Yeah, I think there's been some studies on this. I think that pressure and that stress and that anxiety over, where am I going to go to college, or where am I supposed to go to college, actually affects communities like Gilman in a particularly sharp and potent way, in a way that it doesn't affect other communities. So I think my story is a great example, right? So neither of my parents went to college. We did not have a lot of money. So when I was thinking about where I was going to go to college, it was more like, well, what can we afford? And for most people, right, it's like your in-state public college is where you can afford. I mean, I was lucky enough to get an athletic and academic scholarship on top of that, which basically made my choice for me. I didn't have to look anywhere else. But that conversation, and particularly in my school or around my house, was like, oh, what's Justin doing? And the answer was like, oh, he's going to college. And they were like, oh, that's great. That was it. There wasn't like a follow-up question like, oh, where?
Right.
It was just like, oh, he's going to college.
Yeah.
So I think I was given a gift of low expectations, or almost no I wouldn't say low, because they expected me to go to college, but no, it wasn't a concrete list of specific places where I had to go. And I think sometimes I worry about students in our community that are, from a very early age, given very specific and concrete measures by which they attain success. And it's frequently tied to, the campus that you're going to be on for 4 years of your life.
Yeah, it's a blink of an eye, and then you're out.
I mean, look, I would go back and do college tomorrow. I mean, I think it's a really transformative time and a really important time. But I don't think it depends upon where you're having that experience necessarily. Yeah. It's how you choose to engage with that space and the people in that space. I think that matters far more.
100%. And I would say the people thing is certainly true at any college. Like, if you can utilize the people who are around you and your professors and the connections you can make,
right,
it really doesn't matter where you are, because you'll use those and utilize those relationships for the rest of your life.
And the good news is that we are kind of speculating, but there's been, the Stanford Graduate School of Education did a study on this and proved just what you're saying, that it's about how you engage with people, and particularly people over long periods of time, or on projects that take a little bit longer, or people in positions of authority. That's actually the difference for most people in terms of their future success.
And it's coming from me going to Harvard, it's like different from hearing me say this, but I think the value of going to a school like Harvard or Princeton or wherever, like, is the connections you make. And maybe that's some of the pressure to go to the upper echelon schools, is because parents know that if my kid goes to Harvard, he or she has this world of connections.
But again, I on some level, that is a forward thinking that is limited to a certain socioeconomic class, right? I think my parents assumed, well, we didn't go to college, we're doing pretty good, right? If Justin goes to college, then he'll have more opportunities than us. How about that? And little did they know I was going to become a teacher, right? I think they were maybe pushing me to law school or something. No, they didn't actually do that either. It's for someone who went to a public school and had a wonderful experience at my public school, went to a public college, had a wonderful experience at my public college, and then have come to Gilman. I think I'm trying to constantly remind myself how 90% of the population deal with these issues, so that I can hopefully, narrate those values to my own kids, or and not have them feel that very specific kind of concrete pressure that unfortunately I think a lot of our students deal with.
So in your experience going to Towson,
Go
did you
Tigers.
go Tigers? And apparently you had a wicked pitch on the baseball field. That's what Zealand told me to ask you
Oh, did
about
he?
on the podcast.
There's one kid from William and Mary who might disagree. I think that ball is still not landed. The 0-2 changeup I threw to him is still on
Still thinking about it.
LaSalle or whatever road that is. Yeah.
Still waking up in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Did you know that you wanted to pursue education and get into teaching while you were in school, or kind of what led you here?
So again, this is the beauty of kind of really shapeless expectations. I didn't have any plans. I was just going to college and pursuing what I was interested in. So I double majored in political science and English literature. Political science to begin with because I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. And then I had a cousin who was in law school and then told me how much in loans that she owed when she was coming out of law school. And I'm like, well, I'm not doing that anymore. And then I fell in love with books and I had this wonderful opportunity to double major in English literature. And then I actually applied to some graduate programs after undergraduate and was not accepted anywhere. Turns out the GRE matters a little bit when you're, the GRE I did pretty well on. It was the GRE subject test that I didn't even finish the test. It was so hard. And then you're kind of like, I wanted to be a writer, whatever that meant. And I had a friend whose dad was coaching baseball at Curly and said, hey, do you want to come coach with me? And I was like, well, yeah, I could use the money. And I was substitute teaching. And then a teaching job in the English department at Curly opened up, and I didn't even have to interview. They just were like, here's a class of 34 seniors.
What'd you teach?
American literature and whatever their 10th grade curriculum was. It was like, it's kind of like what our 10th grade is. It's kind of Western literature, sort of.
What was influencing you at Towson to pursue books and reading? Or were you into reading and books your whole life up until that point? Or was it in college when you really found literature?
I think I have like an internal monologue that doesn't stop. And so I'm always, there's a different idea that I'm mulling over in my head at any given time. And then I realized that books were a really concentrated way of like directing that internal monologue and to think a little bit more clearly about these ideas that I'm, always swimming around in my head. So, books can be full of really intense, dense, abstract, philosophically provocative ideas. And so, I think it just helped kind of, helped give me language or metaphors that I could use to articulate what I was thinking.
Did you do much writing at that time too, or was it mostly just reflected in your reading?
No, I think some of the best creative writing I ever did was in the middle of a lecture in class.
No way.
Yeah, because, we want to, what are we talking about? We're going to talk about Toni Morrison today and, jazz and, here's a character. And then my mind just starts going and I start thinking creatively and I just start writing.
So you're inspired to write even in
yeah, and it shouldn't have been that way, but it was.
That's cool.
Those are very frequently the moments that the creative wheels start turning.
For sure.
Yeah.
Were there certain books that you read that you think back to your college days at Towson and you were like, that book maybe led me down this path a little bit more?
So anytime I teach Kurt Vonnegut, I openly confess to the students that, we are reading the author who's the reason that I'm here doing what I'm doing. So the summer going into my senior year, I was going to go into AP English class. So we had to read Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And I can do a whole other podcast on my feelings for that book and that it should never be a summer reading text. But then the other one was a book of, my choice. I'm looking through these descriptions and, Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five is on there. And the description is something along the lines of, Billy Pilgrim travels in time and is abducted by aliens. And I'm like, okay, let's try this out. And I remember reading that book and getting like halfway through it. And I had a moment where I was like laughing out loud because I said, wait a minute, this is literature. This is this is considered like school-worthy literature. I just hadn't been exposed to any postmodern, contemporary, well, at that time, contemporary literature. You know, it was reading Wuthering Heights or, you know, Huck Finn or a lot of these older texts. And so it just blew my mind wide open. So yeah, I mean, I read that. And again, I remember I was on at the beach with my family, and I just like went up to the hotel room and just started writing. Like it inspired me to just sit. I don't even remember what I wrote, but
That's so cool. So both literature and music for you inspired you to create in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Cool.
Totally. And they came together like the same time for me. It's a really wonderful kind of marriage of artistic forms.
And you're able to express that more in college when you're.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you know, for the record, I played baseball at Towson for 2 years, and then I, you know, quit that gig and started a band, man. Yeah.
That's the way to go.
Yeah. Started a band.
That is awesome. So what was the band?
It was a band.
It was a band of Towson guys?
Yeah. It was actually one other guy from the baseball team, and some other guy that I met in my dorm room, and some other just random guy that showed up at an open mic we were at and said, I play drums. And like, drummers are hard to come by. So,
yeah, you're in.
So I was like, I didn't even need to hear him play. I was just like, you're in the band. Yeah.
Cool. So at Gilman, you're a college counselor
Mhm.
and you teach a 60s literature class.
Yep.
What do you study in that 60s literature class? What are your favorite parts of that to teach?
I love James Baldwin. I think he's my favorite philosopher in the course. I don't even think about him really as a writer. He's more of a philosopher. I love teaching this one-act play by Amiri Baraka, Dutchman, every year. It's so provocative and so timely right now. So we just came off of that. The Bell Jar, which we talked about before. And I usually, Cat's Cradle, I do a Kurt Vonnegut novel. I switch back and forth between that and Slaughterhouse-Five. And then this year we're doing something out of the 60s, which I try not to do, but most of the great literature about Vietnam didn't come out until after Vietnam was over, even though Vietnam was, of course, so central to the late 60s. So we're reading the things they carried this year, too.
Oh, great. I'm going to teach that in my short story class in the spring.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
He's like a perfect short story writer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. So I want to talk about the 60s in comparison to the world today, and maybe some of those conversations that you have in your class, and maybe how you use your studies of James Baldwin, you know, some of the music that I'm sure you incorporate into your course. You know, I don't know much about that, the Dutchman. I've never read that, but that sounds like it works for the world today and some of those conversations that you guys have.
Yeah. It's almost too on the nose for today.
What's it about, Dutchman?
So it's a subway ride where a white woman gets onto a subway and accuses a black man of staring at her. And then she kind of carefully and premeditatedly mocks and lures him and tempts him to kind of finally express how he's feeling, and not just about her, but about pretty much every white person on that subway car. And then she murders him. Oh, I shouldn't, spoiler alert, for classes next year. Yeah. It is, I couldn't help but reading it and teaching it again this year and just coming at it anew and thinking about just the way Black lives in America are consistently and systemically and intentionally devalued. And the very notion of kind of Blackness being targeted such that it's, you know, at least in the play, kind of eliminated. Yeah. So it's a very provocative play from a very provocative, if not controversial, writer. Baraka's very controversial at times, but Yeah, I think for my students this year and for me, it's just helped us process, what we're confronting as a country.
Interesting. And using some of the works that you're reading in that class to talk about the world today. And I've tried to do that a lot in my classes too, because high school kids, there's so much going on and so much to process and take in, whether you're following everything or you
Right.
go on Twitter or social media, these guys and girls are all seeing, what's happening in the world, and they need an outlet for some of their thoughts and, some of the questions that they're maybe asking themselves that they don't, maybe at home they don't get a place to voice those opinions, or not with their friends much
Right.
now since COVID. So I think it's important, especially in English class, to provide the space for those types of conversations.
Well, when you have questions about, what's going on, I don't know if your instinct is the same as mine. It's like, I'm like, well, who can I read that can help me better understand that, or help me approach that question?
You can't read the news because
No, yeah, I either go to fiction or nonfiction.
Yeah.
And then I feel like once I read something, I feel like I'm better prepared to actually have an opinion or something to say about it.
Yeah.
I wonder sometimes if someone reads a couple tweets today and then has an opinion about something. I worry a little bit about.
Well, I think it's too condensed. The problem with Twitter for me, and I'm saying this as a Twitter addict because I'm on there all the time, and
I heard this on a podcast,
and I get a lot of my news and not my opinions, but the opinions of other people that I can then think about from Twitter. But it's too condensed a form to actually voice any meaningful position. And I actually turn more to long form podcasts that I listen to, or literature or history, really, to form an opinion on what's going on in the world today. Because I think Twitter is helpful to some degree, but it steers me towards some of those longer form, more nuanced opinions that then I can channel and think about.
I worry sometimes that I don't know isn't an acceptable answer to a question anymore, right? Like, I should do this more in my class, but encourage my students when I ask them a really hard question about something I've read 7 times, allow them the space to say, I don't know. Mm-hmm. I feel like
do you think
there's no permission in today's culture anymore to say you don't know about something.
Why is that? Because there's so much information out there and
people feel empowered to have opinions about everything, whether they're informed or not informed.
Or I don't know, or I don't have an opinion on that.
Yeah.
Let me go look into it a little bit more.
It's not my experience. I don't know.
Yeah. You kind of have to take, you almost just have to take a side on everything. And it's totally fine to say, I don't really know much about that.
It's crazy.
I'd love to look into that a little bit more.
And it's going to take me some time. So give me a month and I'll get back to you.
Give me a month. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. So one of the things that is being filmed today or observed by everyone is The Social Dilemma. Have you gotten a chance to check that out?
I did. Our mutual friend Brian Ledyard clued me into that, as did 17 people in succession after I guess it came out. I watched it, and then I had a lovely conversation with a former student who's studying computer science at Duke, and he made me feel even worse about it. But
he made you feel worse about
what they're doing, right? In terms of intentionally luring you onto their platforms for a longer and longer time, and what they're doing with data collection and things like that.
Well, the data collection is one conversation, but to some degree, you can't really blame a business for wanting you to return. No. The thing that struck me about the documentary are the colors they use, and they make the apps look fun and exciting, and the like button flashes up when you click it, and all your receptors are triggered when you see that tweet that was tailored for you to see at this moment. I think it to some degree it's on the individual to limit your use or have discipline and just know that this is happening.
How much of their the aesthetic that they're creating around social media platforms to get you addicted, how much of that is about you feeling like you're being entertained?
A lot of it.
Almost all of it.
All of it.
And so I don't want to be entertained all the time. So I feel like, I mean, I can go down the YouTube rabbit hole like anybody's business, and they know exactly what to put up there to get me to stay on YouTube.
I think that's probably the best algorithm is the YouTube. Every time I go on my homepage on YouTube, it's everything that I want to watch.
Yeah. So, but what I'm trying to do is disengage from that and spend some time every night not being entertained, but being in thought, which to me, being mindful or thoughtful isn't entertaining at all. But it's spiritually important. So
what do you do to practice that spiritual thought away from the constant entertainment?
Oh, I can do magnetiles with my kids. That doesn't involve a phone. I can, the whole bedtime routine, right, is kind of helpful in that. And that's not entertaining. Well, it could be from the outside perspective, entertaining to see us. Frustrating.
Entertaining for the kids.
For them, for sure. Or any outsider who could hear us trying to get our kids to brush their teeth. So things like that. And then yet I'm lucky I have a little space in my house that has, it's got a computer in it, but that just has music stuff in it. So it's like my little playroom. So I can go down there and completely disengage. And that's, I'm entertaining no one down there, right? My audience most nights is population 1, which is me.
Yep.
So that's incredibly meditative and important.
I think social media and these apps and the constant entertainment actually makes our jobs as teachers, and especially younger kids, just so much more difficult. Because if I'm a 5th grade teacher right now, I have to compete with all the distractions and entertainments and awesome YouTube channels and everything that this kid is watching on a daily basis and could be watching right now if it wasn't for me. I think we are, teachers are becoming or have to kind of occupy a space of entertainment to some degree. Like you have to hook those kids in or you're going to lose them.
I'll push back on that a little bit.
Because you're competing with everything.
So my question about that would be, what part of the brain is older? The part that wants to develop close relationships with, fellow members of our species, or the part of our brain that wants, to just be constantly barraged with entertainment? I bet you, and I'm definitely don't know this for sure, and I'm not a scientist, but I think it's probably an older instinct to want to connect with people and create community, for reasons related to physical and spiritual survival than entertainment. So I think teachers, I'm not sure I've ever gone into a class and said, I got to entertain these kids today. I think I've gone in a lot of times and said, like, how can I create a meaningful connection and relationship with the people that are in front of me today?
I think that's 100% true. And I would say the community part and the person-to-person relationship aspect is older, but I worry that maybe the entertainment desire is stronger. And
well said.
And when especially on the computer, on the screen right now, when you pop the screen up, Zoom doesn't have any of those colors. I'm sitting in my apartment. I don't have any of those, colors that are, psychologically targeted for your receptors. I have to at least persuade you to care that what I'm saying is important and meaningful right off the bat.
Right.
And I think it's hard, but it's a worthy challenge, I think.
Yeah.
Because
put the computer down, pick up the book. Let's talk about the book.
Right.
We're lucky as English teachers. I don't think today we have to interface with computers all the time, but under normal circumstances, it's put your computer away. Let's pick up a book.
Yeah. So much better.
Isn't it wonderful?
Yeah.
Have you tried to read a book on a digital platform?
I hate it. I can't do it.
Didn't make it through the 10th page.
Well, when the Kindle first came out, everyone was like, "Jake, you're such a big reader. You should get a Kindle." And I have a Kindle, and I think I used it once probably.
Mm-hmm.
I like the pages. I like holding the book. I like the feeling of progress.
Yep.
Whereas you get the page count or whatever in the lower left corner. It's not the same as like I'm halfway through this book right now.
Yeah. You can't dog ear a Kindle page.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah. You gotta have it in your hand. You gotta feel the pages.
We're a dying breed though, buddy.
You think so?
Yeah, my brother-in-law told me that physical media is dead, so he's making a lot more money than me in computer science, so he must know.
The book will never die.
Okay, good.
It's the best invention there ever was, I think, maybe.
That's why records are coming back.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Records outsell everything as in terms of physical musical platform.
Really?
Yeah.
I get all my music. You have a record player for sure,
yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm. It started out not as a romantic idea because I was like some hipster who was into records. Like I could afford, records were $2 a pop. So I could go to the record store and get several records, got to do some math. I could, with my $20. So that's why I started collecting records, because I get more music for less money.
Is the sound quality?
I can't get into. I have no idea if the sound quality is better. The audiophiles will tell you that it's way better.
You'd prefer to listen to a record over your Spotify.
I like records because they put me into a space where I can't leave and go somewhere else, where I have the record jacket that I can look at the same time. So, right. And you're not going to skip around from artist to artist. You listen to the whole album in one sitting. So it's a really intense experience with one musician.
So you'll put a record on and just sit down and listen.
Yes.
That's cool. I think people my age, right? Like I'm guilty of this too. Like I'll barely play a full song, skip to the next one.
I actually can't do another task while I'm listening to music. I've tried. Actually, I tried today. I tried to put your podcast on, and that's not music. There's a musical quality to your voice, Jake. But
thank you. Sam Harris as well.
Yeah, that's right. I tried to write like a thank you card. I couldn't do it. I had to like shut you down so I could like just write.
Oh, that's great.
I don't know if it's great. It's like more of a curse. Like I can't multitask.
Well, I'm the same way. I can't really multitask with lyrics. I can play.
Right.
I could play something without lyrics and write a paper. Read a book. But if there's lyrics involved, I'm shutting it down. Shutting it down. That's right. I do like to have some kind of noise going on though.
When I cook, I can listen to music and cook at the same time, or drive.
Oh yeah. Well, I think that counts also as you asked me, do I ever just listen to music without any distractions? Or I think driving counts.
Yeah. Assuming you're watching out for the other people on the
road.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna mess up if there's lyrics in my song while I'm driving.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about Cormac McCarthy because he is a passion of yours, and you do have typically a senior elective on Cormac McCarthy.
Is that
this year too?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How did you find Cormac McCarthy? What engaged you about him? I just finished Blood Meridian this summer, and it is heavy. It is heavy.
So because I started teaching at Gilman. So it was the book that, when you first start teaching here, they're saying, here are the books that you're going to teach this year. And so The Road was one of them. And then I read The Road, and it was like the first book I ever read where I was crying at the end of it. And I said, what just happened here? And I immediately realized I missed everything, right? Whatever I got out of it, I missed a bunch of stuff. So it started with The Road, and then I worked backwards from The Road to Blood Meridian and others. My favorite kind of artists are chameleons, right? They can shape shift and take on different voices and genres and kind of almost intentionally do that. They're like, okay, I think I've got this voice down. How can I, do something different or else, right? It's like, Dylan's country phase, his gospel phase, his folk phase, his blues phase, right? McCarthy is very much in that line with me, right? Like Blood Meridian is a Western, but he'll also write like a horror book like Child of God or like a post-apocalyptic love story like The Road. So yeah, I think what keeps bringing me back to McCarthy is just his genius of being able to take existing forms or genres and move them forward.
Blood Meridian was a challenge to get through because the language, and I would say the language in all of his works is so intense and heavy. And he made me question like my vocabulary because some of the words he used I've never even seen before. I had no idea.
You're not a suzerain of the earth?
Yeah. Does he make up words, or are they all in the dictionary?
Great question.
I didn't know.
He is Shakespearean. There's some words in there that he's compounded to make new words. And there's actually a McCarthy scholar out there who's actually tracked the percentage of that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, that he's inventing language, but he's also just a voracious reader. There's basically one interview with him in the New York Times. He does not like to give interviews, and that's my other quality of my favorite artists, ones who don't talk about their art a whole lot or let their art speak for itself.
He's kind of a hermit, right?
Oh, he won't.
Off in New Mexico or something.
Yeah,
in
Santa Fe.
Yeah, Santa Fe.
Yeah, and his best friend is like a whale biologist.
He doesn't want to talk to anyone.
Yeah, he's got a really healthy interest in writing and a much healthier interest in things other than writing, which obviously come together in his books, right? I mean, he's more of an anthropologist in Blood Meridian than he is a novel writer. Yeah.
And have you taught Blood Meridian in your McCarthy? You teach this in your class?
I teach it every year.
Oh wow. How does it go? How does it go over with seniors?
Great. So I tried to read Blood Meridian 4 different times and couldn't get through it by myself.
That's the story I've heard from a variety.
Is that right?
Yeah. And I almost put it down too, but I was like, I'm finishing this one so I can talk to Justin Baker about it.
Lots of the desert is hot and it's raining, right? Passages. And then I said, well, how am I going to make it through this book? Because I know it's important. I can already sense it's important. I just can't get through it. And I said, well, I'll teach it. So it made me get through the book, and it made me get through it like in a really intentional way.
What do you find so important about this one in particular?
I think it is the most important book about America that I've read. I think it captures, the title, right? America is very much, Mr. Obama has a new book, right? It's a promised land. But I think McCarthy would argue it's a promised land born from blood.
Yeah, I was telling one of my friends as I was reading this that the violence that's described in this is more vivid than any movie I think I've ever seen.
And it's not, it's not gratuitous, right? This is the question certain people, they feel like it's sensationalized, it's gratuitous on some level. I actually think McCarthy writes violence in a beautiful way.
I do too. I agree. Yeah.
It's beautiful. And what does that do to you? It makes you remember that our species is a violent and bloody thing, and that all empires are built on the blood of and the execution and the systematic oppression or genocide of other people. And yet we have this gift of imagination that can turn even the worst parts of us into beautiful forms. Yeah. His writing of violence is, I don't even know if there's any, like cinematically, there's nobody to compare it to. You couldn't say Quentin Tarantino because I feel like that's mostly gratuitous.
Yeah, I agree. It's like sensationalized.
Yeah.
This
the
one.
The closest I could come up with, have you seen the new Charlie Kaufman film on Netflix?
No, I haven't. What's it called?
Okay. I don't remember the name of it. I'm sorry, but it's a psychological thriller.
New?
Yeah, it's brand new. He's the guy that wrote Adaptation, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Okay.
Real thinkers, not much entertainment. And I don't want to spoil the movie, but the movie ends with what should be a very violent moment, and instead it's a dance. He turns the whole violence of the end into this highly orchestrated dance.
It's the same in this, right? The Judge.
Yeah. We ritualize violence as a species because it's integral to who we are. And so we can turn, Christians have ritualized the execution of a man.
Sacrifice.
And believe, or at least Catholics believe, that they're actually eating the body of Christ and drinking his blood. That's not a metaphor. That's transfiguration, right? It's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have, in the most important religious ways, ritualized violence.
And sacrifice.
And sacrifice.
That idea of sacrifice is so important to this and Christianity. And
yeah.
Why do you think sacrifice is such a core element to the human species?
When you say sacrifice, you mean like selfless sacrifice, or you mean like sacrificing other people so you can be in power?
Well, I think in both cases, like in this case, there was sacrifice for, you talked about the birth of the United States or a nation. Right. Christianity, the sacrifice of Christ,
right.
For our sins and the sins of humanity. That idea of sacrifice is such an old idea, and it's almost in a way central in both stories.
Anthropologically, I would say it's probably the foundation of the birth of like civilized groups, right? So to work collectively in large numbers, you have to have a common narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And that common narrative is always going to be like, well, we're great. Those other people over there who are competing for the same resources we are not great.
Mm-hmm.
And so you create rituals through which you validate your life and your sense of being, while simultaneously demonizing the other.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the ritual of violence kind of gets, becomes a part of competing species who are, killing each other over dwindling resources.
Yeah.
And we call it other things, but that's, I think McCarthy, I love McCarthy. His thought experiment is always this: what are we? And The Road is beautiful because he basically in an instant does away with all these things that we think matter. States, governments, family dynamics, communities, T-ball,
everything
whatever,
material,
all gone. And he's saying his thought experiment was like, what would we do in that, right? In this Hobbesian world, right? Mm-hmm. What are we? Violent. And his answer is we are incredibly violent, but it's a survival instinct,
yep.
Right? So he does it without demonizing it. He's not saying we're evil for being that. He's just saying we are part of the living cycle of life and death. And we will do things to survive that we, under civilized setup, we would call evil or sinful.
Right. It's necessary.
But we're also loving creatures too, who form deep bonds. So we are a paradox. And he doesn't shy away from that. The judge in Blood Meridian is interesting because he's trying to convert you
to this violence
to his
at all costs, and just
God is war.
God is war.
Yeah.
God is bloodshed. God is violence. I mean, he's a sick creature. The judge.
He is convincing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like we read Blood Meridian in class and then The Road afterward, and I feel like The Road is McCarthy's reconsideration of the judge.
How so?
Well, because I'm trying not to give anything away in the book, because the judge is an omnipotent force in Blood Meridian. He is figuratively and literally everywhere, such that at the end, right, the kid is hearing him when he's not even there.
Mm-hmm.
And his theories are persuasive, because how could you look around you in this country as Western migration was happening and not think that war is the ultimate thing to worship,
mm-hmm.
and that to test yourself against another person, whether you win or lose, is the only way to define the value of your existence. And then, of course, in The Road, I think McCarthy, as an older man who had a son later in life, says, well, maybe there's other ways that we can define ourselves, or should define ourselves as a species. And maybe there's a different story to tell about us. And that's the one about sacrifice.
So interesting that his development over the course of writing this book and the next one, the road, that he just kind of reframes that question.
Yeah.
But what I like about teaching English is the conversations about just the duality of mankind and how we're capable of all of these terrible things, but also all these amazing, beautiful things at the same time. So,
well, that's why I've gravitated. I used to teach the Cormac McCarthy class. Used to be a class on existentialism, and that's why I've as someone who was a proud atheist and moved toward agnosticism and really dabbles in existentialism mostly. That's what I love about that philosophy, is that you're never anything other than what you're choosing to do at the moment. Mm-hmm. So today I'm hoping that I've chosen to be very kind and loving at times, and I'm sure there will be other moments today where I'm a complete jerk.
Yep.
And the truth is that I'm both of those things.
Right.
So you can have an ideal of what you want to be, right, in the perfect form, but I don't know. The beautiful messiness of being human is that you're a multitude.
Walt Whitman. Come back. Great. Well, that sounds like an awesome class, that 60s literature with seniors. And you guys, Blood Meridian, that's heavy
Bart
duty.
Griffith came up to me in his second year and he's like, "How are you getting away with teaching Blood Meridian?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Shh, don't tell anybody." No, it's you can't read that book and walk away without questioning what it means to be a part of America.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Is that your favorite book to teach, or do you have one that you kind of look forward to every year?
Yeah, Blood Meridian, The Road. I used to like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest a lot. I haven't taught that in a little while.
Blood Meridian and The Road is the extent of my McCarthy reading. What would you recommend next?
No Country for Old Men. And it's one of those weird things where I would say, watch the movie first.
Really?
Yeah, the Coen brothers are,
yeah. That's a classic.
Brilliant. Watch the movie first because the movie's phenomenal. And then the book, there's certain things you can't film. So the book adds to that experience. Yeah, it's like the only book I would say watch the movie first and then read the book.
There's not a Blood Meridian movie, is there?
You know who owns the rights to the screenplay for Blood Meridian? James Franco.
Really?
Right, I know. Well, that's a guy that was falling asleep in literature classes at Yale, I believe, a couple of years ago, right?
Really?
Yeah. He went to Yale and studied literature, romantic poetry.
Yeah, I think I did know that.
Yeah. He also did a film version of Child of God, which is another Cormac McCarthy novella. He owns the rights to Blood. He's done some. Yeah, you can't. It's infamously the unfilmable book. How would you film?
Yeah.
Blood Meridian.
Yeah, I think you just have to pick it up and read it, and
yeah,
like you said, those descriptions of violence and mankind and nature. There's just there's no substituting for what he writes. It's
well,
amazing.
I think, again, as an existentialist kind of novice, like, the universe does not care about us.
Oh, we see that with COVID.
Well, right.
Yeah.
We are insignificant relative to the physical machinations of this thing, which is so far bigger than we could ever imagine, right? Mm-hmm. And McCarthy makes sure to underscore that point, right? That whatever this trivial war game that we're playing amongst each other, it's a small piece of sand on a large beach, right? In terms of, so I think he also dabbles in this notion that, even to commit yourself to evil, as the judge does, or what we would call evil, or what we've defined as evil, or you're like the dad in The Road who does everything, out of a love for your son. I think the sad truth is he would say both are equally meaningless relative to the largeness of the universe. But that doesn't mean they don't matter. So he makes that distinction.
Love it. Cormac McCarthy. He's
on that note,
he's a lot to take in and think about.
He's
definitely an author where you need, it'd be helpful to have a class to discuss.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, Justin Baker. Well, maybe before we close up, I'd like to just get a little bit more about your path to teaching and your love for literature and music and how all of that comes together here at Gilman, and maybe what this place, has meant for you over your time here.
Wow. So I told you that I kind of fell into a teaching job at Curley, and I really loved the students. The setup there was a real challenge in terms of the number of kids in the class and stuff like that. So I think I was kind of at that point when my third year in there was like, maybe teaching's not for me. And then, you just get lucky, and I'm taking grad classes with Brian Ledyard, and I must have said something smart in class one time. And then a job opened up, and I said, Brian, would you mind passing my resume along to anybody that you know there? Because I don't think, we were at one of your podcasts, you were talking about Carney Sando. I don't think my resume would stand out in the Carney Sando pile of resumes, right, that Gilman got. And somehow I lucked out, and I'm sure they were just doing Brian a favor at the time. And they gave me an interview, and I guess I just convinced them about how much I care about teaching and books. So, and I knew it was the job for me when during one of the interview lunch, they said, well, if you could design any class, what would it be? And I said, wait, you get to do that here? I can just teach whatever I want.
Yeah.
So, and luckily I got the job, and I think it helped that I was, I had the baseball background and as well. So yeah, and then I just got lucky, and I got the job, and man, to come to a place every day where you get to be your full self and engage with other people like you and Cesare, who are just interesting people who have these different gifts and talents that they want to share with you. Oh man, this is a school. School is a great place.
It is.
For a vocation. Yeah.
And everyone is just doing what they love to do. So, I can talk to you about Cormac McCarthy, even though I've read 2 books and I don't know too much about him. I'm so interested in what it does to you and why you structured an entire course over this guy, or the 60s, and you're passionate about that. And, just I like to get you going and get you on your, talking about what you love to do. And everyone here is like that. So
right?
it's special in that way.
It's like fertile ground. And, people, I used to do admission stuff, and they were like, what do you love about Gilman? And I would say, well, I don't know who Gilman is because I've never met him or her. But I said, I know Dan Christian, and I know Dr. Thornberry, and I know Steve Sawinski, and I know Patrick Hastings, I know Beth Knapp. And that is, the people here are just phenomenal. And the students, right, are so smart, way smarter than me.
Mm-hmm.
So thank God I got a couple of years on them, right? And so this is a place where every day I come in one person and come out a different person. And that kind of, death and rebirth, that cycle of newness. Yeah, I'm sure other people are happy, being accountants or being lawyers like I thought I wanted to be. But the level of contentment that comes from teaching at a place like Gilman, which is not, I can tell you, I can reassure you, having many friends that teach in a lot of different places, is not happening everywhere.
Right.
So, thankfully this is an established and well-resourced place that basically hires really smart and engaged and passionate people and says, do what you do well.
That's the best part about it.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even during COVID, when you're teaching on your laptop or you're doing the hybrid, it's up to you to figure out what works for you and how you teach best in this situation, which that freedom, there's nothing like that. And not a lot of places give you that. So
that's right.
It is a great place. But Justin Baker, it's been a pleasure to talk to you today and get you in the studio here for episode number 13.
Thanks, Jake. Thanks, Cesare. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Cesare. Great time.